So there's a fine line between genius and idiot. I think we all know that. But nowhere is this line so fuzzy as it can be in medical research, particularly when the guinea pigs are the people who are doing the research themselves. So in this episode, you're going to get a rogues gallery of people who are possibly brave, possibly stupid, or possibly something in between. Let's go with maybe misguided. Push play again and enjoy.
The 1793 yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia was pretty bad. So straight definition of number of people, like 10% of the city's inhabitants died.
That's not a definition, that's just a number.
Yeah, it's just a number. 5,000 out of 50,000 people died.
Oh.
Over the course of that summer, from August to November, like a bunch of people died.
Exactly like COVID in Canberra.
Not quite, but still. And then another 20,000 left the city. So everyone who's not dying is bugging out.
With yellow fever.
I assume they're not, with or without, they're bugging out.
I'm going to go with at least X% have it, and they're like, we're leaving and bringing it to you.
Possibly.
Welcome.
Possibly.
Adolphia land for yellow fever.
It was the seat of George Washington's government at the time. So George Washington bugged out, Congress bugged out. Everyone's just, I'm getting out of there.
They leave the bell?
Yes, they probably did leave the bell. It's a horrible disease. Your skin turns yellow, you vomit black blood, and you bleed from your organs until you die. So you can understand why people are leaving.
Vomit black blood.
We'll come to that. We will come
I really hope so, because...
Anyway, by winter, the epidemic sort of faded. People stopped dying and they didn't forget about it, but they were traumatized. But it came back in following years. 1797, 1798, 1799. And so when it came time in 1803 for the young medical student Stubbins Firth to choose his thesis for his Doctor of Medicine, Stubbins Firth, 2 Fs in Firth, F-F-I-R-T-H.
That was the name I was really having difficulty with.
I appreciate that.
I want the conversation between the parents. So Joe, nah. What about Keith? Nah. Stubbins? Fuck yes.
Sold on Stubbins.
Found it.
Straight away, Stubbins is the name.
And it's got to have 3 Bs.
Listener, if your first name is Stubbins, I applaud you. I salute you. What an awesome first name. It is Stubbins.
So you get called Stubby. Or Bins.
But it really, when I read this name, I thought there is no other time in history other than like early settler America when you had names like Stubbins.
Powdered wigs and wooden false teeth, otherwise no one's called Stubbin.
So anyway, 1803, he's choosing his thesis to do for his Doctor of Medicine degree.
Sure.
And, the topic was pretty obvious. He's like, yellow fever pandemic. We need to know more about what is
arthritis.
No, he didn't. Oh. Not arthritis.
I know what I'll do.
Yellow fever epidemic.
Yeah, opportunity.
And so he wrote in the dedication pages of his thesis, to the inhabitants of Philadelphia.
Cheers.
Fellow citizens, you who have felt, who have seen, who have trembled at the dire progress of a malignant epidemic and its march characterized by disorder, dismay, desolation, and death, who by your fear and forebodings have accelerated the advances thereof, hastened its termination, and added force to its malignancy, and alone can judge whether this work, which is intended to obviate those evils, be worthy of your patronage.
So 2 things. Love the alliteration.
Yeah.
2, none of the people dying of yellow fever are going to read your thesis, mate.
The people worried about yellow fever might.
No. How many people worried about COVID have read PhD theses on COVID? 6.
But they might have been helped by science.
I'm not saying they can't be useful. I'm saying it's nice of him to devote it to people who will never, ever, ever even know it exists.
Stubbins had a mission. His goal was to clear up one thing about yellow fever in particular, whether it was contagious. So there was a lot of people didn't know at the time what caused it, and I'll tell you now, it's a bit of a spoiler, it's mosquitoes. But they thought at the time, do we pass this to each other? Do we not? How does this flow around?
If not contagious, then spontaneous?
But if you can prove that it's not contagious, then the number one thing about that is then people are not so worried about treating each other.
Yeah, it's okay to lick people who've got it.
We'll come to that.
As long as you don't get bitten on the tongue by a mosquito while you do it.
Yeah, but the key thing is you're not so worried about catching the disease if it's not contagious. You can go and treat people.
Yes.
So the question for Stubbins Firth was, how do you prove it's not contagious?
I've got a few ideas, but they're not great.
He probably tried them. So Stubbins laid out in his thesis a plan of 15 different experiments that he tried.
14 that would not get past ethics and one that might squeak. Or none.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to tell you about these 15 experiments. So experiment 1. A small-sized dog was confined in a room and fed upon bread soaked in black vomit harvested freshly from a dying yellow fever patient.
Dogs love that.
Well, at the expiration of 3 days, after 3 days, the dog became so fond of it that he would eat the ejected matter without the bread. The bread was therefore discontinued and he was fed exclusively thereon for a week.
Calling it fed.
So this is, again, the black vomit that came from the dying yellow fever patients.
Yeah, that had not slipped my mind.
After the first day, he had black discharges per annum. Per annum?
Bumhole.
Yeah, per annum.
Von anus.
Which continued for 2 days after he fed on other substances. No other effect was produced upon the animal. He enjoyed as good health after the experiment as before.
Just pooed bile, puke, blood.
He just pooed some black poos and he really enjoyed eating the black vomit.
It's supposed to be black, aren't they? In dogs.
Experiment 2.
Yeah.
A small-sized cat was confined in a room and kept without food. At the end of 3 days, I gave her 3 ounces of the black vomit. See, the cat is discerning. You've got to wait until the cat is ready to eat it, which she ate with avidity. The same quantity was given her daily for 5 days without her evincing any signs of disease. The discharges were of a darker colour.
Oh, just feeding things. Puke. Sick puke. Just puke. Want some puke? No. How hungry I am. Not that hungry. When do you think you will be? Never. I'm going to start on my fingers.
Okay, let's ramp up. Experiment 3. Having made a large incision into the back of a dog and dissected the skin off from the cellular membrane and muscles, thereby forming a cavity, into which I poured 1 dram of fresh black vomit obtained from a patient in the city hospital who was in the last agonies. And drawing the skin together, kept it in that situation by means of a dry suture. The dog was confined and prevented from irritating his back by rubbing it. The incision healed by the first intention, the black vomit was absorbed, and he continued perfectly healthy.
I love the description. Basically, I dug a hole in a dog. Like, you can science it all you want.
But I covered it up.
I dug a hole in a dog and then I stapled it shut.
With some vomit in there.
Look, we've all done that. Some dogs need more discipline than others.
Things get a little bit dark next.
Now it's going to take a turn.
The jugular vein of a dog was opened and 1 ounce of black vomit injected into it. He immediately showed signs of great uneasiness, puked and purged violently, became convulsed and expired in 10 minutes in great agony.
So when they say opened the vein, that may have an effect too.
Well, yes.
Do they mean a tiny hole enough to pour puke in? Because otherwise, I'm going to say it probably was upset because it was bleeding out.
It could be. Well, his experiment 5 is testing that because experiment 5, so experiment 4 proved it is deadly if you put the puke straight into your jugular. Experiment 5,
Yeah, who could have guessed?
the same experiment was repeated with water with precisely the same result. It is therefore self-evident that water injected into the blood vessels produces the same effect as the black vomit. So basically, don't open your jugular, inject stuff straight in there. Okay.
Well, that's only liquids. They should have tried solids too. Then we tried sand. Then we went with leaves. Like, we got to be sure. Gas.
Yeah.
Plasma.
Well, no, because, what he wants to be sure about is the contagion of yellow fever. So putting it in dogs,
how does he know it
things
doesn't
like that.
come through sand or leaves?
Experiment 6.
No.
On the 4th of October, 1802, I made an incision in my left arm, midway between the elbow and the wrist, so as to draw a few drops of blood. Into the incision, I introduced some fresh black vomit.
Yeah.
A slight degree of inflammation ensued, which entirely subsided in 3 days, and the wound healed up very readily.
Cool.
Experiment 7.
Although I will give any medical practitioner, dodgy or otherwise, who says I'm going to do it to me, like that's a hat tip. That's a good on you, champ.
I'll come back to that later. It's actually a thread throughout this whole episode.
Oh, and many. I mean, the number of people went, oh, fuck it, I'll do it on me.
I'll do it on me. I'll do it on me.
We've just covered an episode where a gentleman did it on him.
Yeah, indeed.
That went well.
Indeed. Experiment 7. 4 days after the above experiment, having obtained some fresh black vomit, I made a considerable incision in my right arm, into which I introduced 5 drops of it. Having closed the sides of the wound and applied an adhesive plaster over it with a bandage around the arm, it was left for 2 days, whereupon examination it appeared that no more inflammation had taken place than would have occurred had not the black vomit been introduced.
So what's plan B when he goes, oh, fuck, now I've got it? A poultice? Mercury, tinctures of laudanum.
Yes, that hope.
But no,
maybe
seriously,
a bit of prayer.
like, oh, good, it is infectious. Oh, wait.
I've
got yellow
shown.
fever.
I think he's working off the basis here that he really believes it's not. He's really working from the idea, no, this is not infectious.
So he's not testing, he's trying to prove.
Yeah, he is.
That's not science.
Experiment 8 is basically repetition.
Yeah.
I repeated experiments 6 and 7 20 times on various parts of my body and with precisely the same results.
Except by about 7 times, he's like, I think I quite like it. I'm kind of into this.
Don't give me the bread and blood. Just give me the vomit straight.
The vomit. My problem is, how do I get enough vomit? Because everyone's left town.
There was a lot of vomit around. Around. Experiment 9. This is where it gets fun.
Cool.
2 drops of fresh black vomit were dropped into my right eye.
See, I can't do eye drops. They don't bother me. I just, no matter what, I literally have to hold my eye open like a beast.
Closes too quickly?
It closes on its own no matter what I do. And people go, why are you scared? It's like, I'm not scared. I just cannot convince my eye to stay open. My wife can do it. She kind of goes, doop, looks slightly, ting, it's in. And she goes, why don't you just do that? It's like, I try. So I don't care whether it's vomit. I just can't get eye drops in. I'd have to smear it all over my face and blink it in.
So you couldn't do this bit?
I'd have to blink it in. I'd need a litre of black vomit.
You would be fine with sewing the vomit under your skin.
Well, that's easy.
But not the eye drop vomit.
My skin can't resist the scalpel no matter how much it flinches.
Well, he says it's roughly like normal eye drops. It felt a little bit uneasy for a minute, but produced no pain or inflammation. I have frequently had cold water produce the same effect.
Eye drops. Come on, when are we getting rectal? Come on.
You know, there's definitely rectal in this story, of course.
Gotta be. Or a drop,
not in this particular bit.
A dropper down the end of the old champ, surely.
Experiment 10. 3 ounces of recent black vomit were put into an iron skillet and set on the fire that the fluid may evaporate.
Everybody clear the room.
During which time I frequently held my head over it and inhaled the gas or steam without experiencing any unpleasant situation.
Except for wanting to throw up. I'm going to inhale hot vomit gas. I don't care if it's got yellow fever. It's hot vomit gas.
It is. It's hot vomit gas. It's not good.
With no ill effects. Like, okay, now here's the problem. This guy's not representative of humans.
No, he's really not.
You cannot generalize from this robot.
Okay, experiment 11. Basically the same as the last one, but he got a lot of it and boiled it in a pot for a few hours.
Yes.
In a confined room. Good. So he sat in the room sucking in the fumes while it reduced down to like a hard paste.
Oh, like vomit hash?
Yes, vomit hash. He got rid of all of the liquid. So the experiment 11 was first sitting there and getting the fumes. No result. Experiment 12. Now I have a paste of black vomit from the last experiment. The extract procured during the previous experiment was made into pills. And these were all swallowed on the same day without the least effect produced by them.
Why just eat it?
Well, he made little pills.
I'm going to turn them
into
doctor. Pills.
He's a doctor. I've made some little vomit pills.
My buddy's a pharmacist. He needed something to do. Can you encapsulise these?
After repeating the last 2 experiments, this is number 13. After repeating the last 2 experiments several times and with precisely the same results, I drank, he says I took, but that's what he meant. I drank half an ounce of the black vomit immediately after it was ejected from a patient.
Pretty much pashed a puking patient.
And sucked it down and diluting it with 1.5 ounces of water.
Could you do us a favour and puke in this cup? Well, I can get some of it in the cup.
He says that the taste was slightly acidic.
Was it?
No more effect was produced than if I had taken water alone.
Again, not a human.
Having satisfied myself that the black vomit itself...
No. So you come to me with a cup of puke and you move it towards me. I'm topping that up immediately. I'm topping that cup up. Like, it's not like it's not that bad.
You're like, you need a mixer.
It's puke. No, I mean, I'm topping up as in... It's not,
so you're not the vomit drinking scientist?
No, I'm not. I'm more of your fecal transplant guy.
Non-vomit drinking scientist.
Yeah. I'll eat capsules of other people's shit, obviously, but I'm not going to drink vomit. I have my standards.
Fresh vomit as well. Well, he tried the fresh and the cooked vomit.
Distilled. He made a liqueur.
What are we doing here? Having satisfied myself that the black vomit could not communicate the disease, I thought of desisting from any further experiments.
Yeah.
But upon mature consideration, I thought it best to continue them, which I did, repeating them a great number of times and varying them as much as possible with precisely the same results. But what if it's not the vomit, but the sweat or the blood or the saliva or the urine that might be
So there are another whatever divisible by 15, another 193 experiments.
He starts combining the experiments here. Experiment 14.
I'm gonna cut myself and piss in it.
I got the blood from a dying patient and injected it into my leg.
Cool.
No result.
No.
So he finished up with experiment 15. He got the saliva, the sweat, and the bile from a sick patient and then rubbed it into his eyes and incisions in his body. And then finally he got the patient's urine and then rubbed it into all bits of his body as well, which again produced no difference at all except for some minor irritation when he rubbed the urine into his eyes.
Well, that happens to the best of us.
You'll be pleased to know that Stubbins passed his thesis.
Oh, fuck, I forgot. This is to get a PhD. Like, you and I have both done those. I barely had to do any of that
Did you do any of that?
Almost nothing.
How much urine did you rub into your face? Your own urine or a dying patient's urine?
It's fair to say a bit, but none of it was to do with my subject. Like that was not a requirement. That was just part of the experience.
He was eventually shown to be wrong. His idea about yellow fever was kind of, it was okay, but it's carried by mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And he'd taken blood and vomit from patients that happened to be just past their contagious state. But
are you shitting me? So that was the whole happenstance. Like, they're just not contagious anymore.
Yes.
He never thought to change that up.
But that's not really what I'm interested in today.
Well, but I am.
What I'm interested in is, as you've hinted throughout this, the scientists who do it to themselves, the ones who take it on the chin and do the self-experimentation themselves. I want to revel in the heroism and explore its ethics. All of the scientists who experimented on themselves. Welcome to The Wholesome Show.
The podcast that explores our own holes for the whole of science.
Yeah, something like that. The Wholesome Show is me, Will Grant.
And me, brave hole explorer Rod Lambert.
So what I've got a whole bunch of stories for you here, like little mini stories of scientists.
I want the puke story.
Doing them themselves. I think there might be some other puke stories in here. I've got a little jar here.
You do?
You pull a name out of the hat. I'll tell you that story. There's basically a collection here of heroes, idiots, and sad stories.
What colour paper are the idiots? Because I want the idiots. Horace Wells. Horace Wells.
Don't confuse me. I'm gonna look these up. But before we dive into them, I just wanted to.
I got excited.
There's a bunch of sources for this. A lot of different places, and I'll talk about them at the end. But I did want to flag Alex Bose's work, Electrified Sheep, particularly for this. Horace Wells. Wells.
You can tell me to choose another one, aren't you?
Not quite a hero. Not quite an idiot. He's in the indeterminate category. He's a dentist in the mid-19th century in America.
Self-exploring dentistry.
Yes.
I'm hearing hero.
Big phase here, and we'll find a lot of people in this, exploring anesthesia. So a lot of the people that have done self-experimentation, it's about anesthetics.
Excuse to get high.
So his first go was with nitrous oxide. So he was one of the earliest to explore the use of nitrous oxide in dentistry. So in 1844, he got his assistant John Riggs to dose him with nitrous oxide and then extract one of his teeth.
See, it was going well at first. Like, I want my assistant to give me some of the giggle gas.
I don't know why he needed to get one of his teeth out.
Well, to find out the effect on dentistry. I'm going out on a limb here.
It was successful. He didn't mind having his tooth pulled out straight away. He also experimented with ether and chloroform, and he eventually became addicted to chloroform due to excessive use.
Oh, what a shit thing to be addicted to.
I have not heard of anyone previously addicted to chloroform.
Doesn't this make you feel like you got brain damage and then you wake up feeling worse?
I think so. He inhaled chloroform as an anesthetic shortly before his suicide, 4 years later. So I put him in the sad category.
So shortly before, do you mean as in a way to make it happen?
I think so.
He used it.
Give me another one.
Oh, this one better be the lucky one. Herbert Woolard and Edward Carmichael. I scored?
Okay. As I said before, heroes, idiots, and sad stories. Fuck me. These guys are the idiots.
Did I read the names too far? Should I?
Herbert Woolard and Edward Carmichael.
Yes.
So the key thing about these guys is we know they were both involved in the experiment, but we don't know which one did which job. So they published the paper together, and they said that one of us was involved in one bit and the other was involved in the other. They didn't say who. So it doesn't.
The perfect crime.
In 1933, anatomists Herbert Woolard and Edward Carmichael wanted to study referred pain. Pain in one part of the body comes out somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, you might have heard, you
You get poked in the eye and your knee falls off.
something like that.
We've all had that.
But, you know, they were most interested in like a heart attack sort of thing. You know, you get pain down your left side and your left arm, that kind of thing. They're thinking, what is the idea of referred pain? So what they're going to have to do is trigger some pain and see where it pops out in the body. One of the doctors lay spread-eagled on a table with his genitals out.
Well, you didn't need to say. That's obvious. Of course.
The other stood over him and
Drooling.
gripped his scrotal sac and stretched it out. Then he put like a little, I guess it was some sort of flat surface, a pan, like a
pan,
a little frying pan sort of thing on the ball.
That has a lip as well, though.
I know, but
so the scrotum was levering over the edge of the lip of the pan, and the ball was in the pan.
They just wanted to get one ball.
Yeah,
he just wanted to get one ball.
He's not a monster. Yeah, fair enough.
And then he gradually stacked weights on it to see what the pain was like.
Bad. Like they're taking a fetish and they're trying to make it look like science.
They published it in the journal Brain, which is a very important journal.
What year?
1933 they did the experiment. So let's say they published it the year after.
Also, brain being a word for scrotum, so that's quite a coincidence.
300 grams produced slight discomfort in the right groin. 650 grams caused severe pain to the right side of the body.
Yeah.
They confirmed that injury to the testicles does indeed cause pain to be referred throughout the body. For instance, as the weight on the testicle increased to over 2 pounds, the subject reported pain of a sickening character, not only in his groin, but also spreading across his back.
So I don't know. I don't think that's referred pain. I think that's just pain. Like if they'd squashed his ball and his hand started hurting, I'd go, okay, that's unusual. But he's like, my ball hurts and everything that radiates from it as the weights increase. That's not revelatory.
I'm sorry.
That's not revelatory.
There are some real heroes in this batch, but
oh, come on.
those guys are well up in the idiot front.
Ball in a fry pan with bricks on it, hero. Absolute heroes.
Give you another one.
Oh, I want more of theirs. Come on. Nicholas Sen.
He's one of my favorites. He's one of my absolute favorites.
I hope it's for the wrong reasons.
Nicholas Sen. Yeah. He was an army surgeon working in America at the end of the 19th century. He rose to be pretty prominent in the he became chief surgeon of the 6th Army Corps. In 1898, founder of the Association of Military Surgeons in the United States, and president of the American Medical Association, 1897 to 1898.
So average achiever.
Yeah. Well, he's doing all right. He's doing all right. Okay, so one of his experiments in 1901, he wanted to work out if cancer is contagious.
I'm already excited.
And he draws a little bit from old Stubbins'.
Yeah, he does.
He got the lip cancer from a patient and extracted a lymph node from that, from the cancer from that, and then surgically inserted a piece of that cancerous lymph node under his own skin.
Don't.
After 2 weeks, the transplant started to fade and Sen concluded that cancer is not contagious.
Done. That's cool. Fuck repetition. I took one bit from one person, stuck a tiny bit in me in one part of my body, didn't get me cancer, job done.
Hey, repetition might be one of the interesting things here. Can't get your hands in?
My giant. John Hunter.
John Hunter. John Hunter.
You don't even remember him.
Oh, yeah, okay. He's not really much of a hero, bit of an idiot.
Excellent. Finally one I can get on board with.
It's 18th century London. London's population is booming. Also booming sex work. And also booming with all the sex work in London.
Diseases?
Sexually transmitted diseases.
It's coincidence.
All over the place.
Correlation is not causation.
Few people knew how sexually transmitted diseases work. They knew that there was the sex and then there's the disease.
Doesn't the name give it away?
I don't think they knew that at the time.
They didn't call it that. They just called it diseases.
They didn't have good ideas of viruses or bacteria back then. No science existed on how they developed or if if these sexually transmitted diseases are related to each other. They just knew they turn up on your dong or your vagina, and it's like, something's not great here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's not supposed to be that color.
John Hunter. He actually did a lot of other good science. He helped out in the smallpox vaccine with Edward Jenner.
Yep.
He was like Edward Jenner's supervisor. But anyway, he believed that gonorrhea was just an early stage of syphilis. So he theorized that if gonorrhea could be treated early, it would prevent its symptoms from escalating and becoming syphilis. It's a theory. So what he did, he put fluids from one of his patients with gonorrhea into self-inflicted cuts on his penis, so he could.
I'm already delighted.
So he could see how the disease would run its course. Because the problem is he couldn't fully see, whereas he can monitor this one nice and closely.
Let's not pretend the method doesn't have issues. So first up, put cuts in your ding dong. You know, that's where I go, I want a different method. I'm already out. Cut your pee-pee and then put in it. I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong tribe, you know, like there was not a lot of male rituals to make me a man by damaging my pants area.
But why don't you get some fluid from one of your patients and
why not urethral-y?
Problem was,
the problem.
He started showing symptoms of the disease, so started showing symptoms of gonorrhea, and he thought he'd made a breakthrough.
Except for all those hookers he'd been rooting before?
Because he saw the progression from gonorrhea to syphilis. Yeah. But the problem was the patient he got the pus from
had both. Yeah, it's like gonorrhea doesn't protect you from syphilis. I love that one. Must be one.
Hunter gave himself painful sexual disease and hindered STD research for nearly half a century.
Oh, and hindered it as well.
Yeah, because they continued to think after that syphilis was the flow-on from gonorrhea.
That's my favourite bit. Not only did I fuck it up, I stopped anyone else from getting it right for half a century.
He also convinced physicians to use mercury vapor and cut off infected sores, believing it would stop syphilis from developing. Yes. So catastrophic failure there.
No, that was more than fail. That was active damage. That's genius. I'm getting to like this guy. Johann Wilhelm Ritter.
Oh, Ritter.
Can I top up your delicious heaps normal?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I am enjoying this enormously, actually.
Yeah, me too. Like, I never thought I would be so keen on a non-alcohol beer. You know what I learned, though? The difference between a non-alcohol beer, where they don't have it in the first place, and the tasty ones seem to be they start with beer and then they extract the alcohol. It's different. I'm a fan of the extracted ones more, I think.
Do you want to guess if Ritter is a hero or an idiot?
Ritter. Idiot.
Alessandro Volta invented the world's first battery in 1800.
Mm-hmm.
And Johann Wilhelm Ritter heard about it, and he's like, I need to try this for myself.
I'm going to strap it on my head.
Close.
Great.
Close. I need to not just try this for myself, but on myself.
I want to know how many batteries you can eat before you get bad side effects.
He started by exposing his tongue to the current.
Of course he did. Enjoying that immensely, he moved on.
It had an acidic flavour.
Uh-huh.
Then he shoved the wires in his nose.
Yes, he did.
And this made him sneeze.
Anything like this that has the word shove in it, I like where this is going.
His eyeballs. This caused strange colours to swim in his vision.
Mm-hmm.
Next up.
Come on.
You know it.
Don't let me down.
Straight to the dick.
Yep.
So
I can't believe he took that long.
And listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There are a lot of idiots in here.
There are.
I don't mean it. I don't mean it. Okay, he wrapped his penis up in a cloth soaked in lukewarm milk.
Well, in his defense, who doesn't do that at night anyway?
Okay. He zapped it with the wires coming out of the battery, and he got erect. And
that's called a fear boner, though, because he doesn't know what's going to happen.
And then he came. He seems to be the world's first electro-stimulated orgasm.
How strong is a battery? Just asking for science.
I don't actually know. I have no idea. Like old school battery, it's
not a car battery.
It's not far off that. it's plates of metal and acid.
So I think the milk might have had a role as well, though.
It could have done, but the problem was he quite liked this.
What's the problem with that? It's beautiful, man.
After this, he would tell people he was going to marry his battery. He kept going. he increased the current more and more, forcing himself to endure longer and longer periods and using opium to dull the pain.
Well, that's just clever.
Repeated electrification caused his eyes to grow infected. He endured frequent headaches, muscle spasms, numbness, and stomach cramps. His lungs filled with mucus. He temporarily lost much of the sensation of his tongue. Dizzy spells overcame him, causing him to collapse. At one time, the current paralyzed his arm for a week, and yet he continued, boasting, "I have not shrunk from thoroughly assuring myself of the invariability of the results through frequent repetition."
Best orgasm you've ever had, regardless of the cost.
I know that he definitely did on the genitals, but I think he went all over the body. He's just zapping himself.
Oh, this wasn't just increasingly like if a little bit was good, a lot must be great.
He's just seeing how far he can go, and he just keeps going. This is like 1803.
I bet it ends well.
Like that. No, it doesn't.
Shocked.
One reviewer of his work commented, "Never has a physicist experimented so carelessly with his body." Yes, he is described as a physicist.
That makes me so happy. I'm waiting for physiologist at least, but no. This is a guy who should be calculating what happens when kids spin around on a playground equipment.
Or the movement of the sun or, electrons. Yeah, he's seeing what happens when you electrify bits of your body.
Not coming from a battery.
His weakened condition is believed to have contributed to his death from tuberculosis at the age of 33.
Tuberculosis, though.
Yeah.
Not one of the good ones.
No, it's not. There's other things going on, but I don't think he was made healthier by his habits.
It sounds a little bit like a moral judgment, though. Like, isn't he the guy who used to electrocute his dick? And you're like, yeah, that's what it killed him. It's like, no, TB kills a lot of people.
Are you on his side here?
I think he's been misrepresented. I think it's prejudice. They hate electric dick man.
All right. Who you got?
David Pritchard.
In the 1980s, the UK parasitologist David Pritchard was travelling through Papua New Guinea.
No bad story starts with parasitologist. All good from here.
I'll come to some general trends in this later, but one of the things is very clear: parasitologists, you're not a real parasitologist unless you've had some parasites. Like
I've always said that.
Traveling through Papua New Guinea and observed that that locals who had hookworm infections had far fewer allergy symptoms than their peers who didn't have the hookworm.
Worth it.
Yeah.
You get bad hay fever, don't you?
I do. I get hay fever.
Have you thought about hookworm?
I have not.
Give it credit, man.
There seems to be some evidence. Anyway, so he thought about this for a while, and in 2004 he came back. He taped 50 parasitic hookworms to his arm and let them crawl through his skin to infect him. Mm-hmm. He did end up demonstrating that mild hookworm infections could reduce allergy symptoms by calming the body's immune response to allergens.
Okay.
And might be something in asthma or something like that might be useful there.
Uh-huh.
But there's others that have given sort of mixed results. So 2017 study showed that hookworms secrete a protein that can train your immune system not to inflame tissues when you inhale allergy or asthma triggers. But another study is less promising. Look. So he helped. It didn't seem to be 100% clear that hookworm is a solution to allergies, and you can still get injected with hookworms or yourself.
Yeah, mild is doing a lot of work there when you said mild infestation or mild infection with. How do you keep it mild? Okay, 49 of you can come in, but 50, no, we're not mild anymore.
I have no idea.
Head count every day.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, anything that starts with first infect yourself with the thing that people avoid, like the plague, I think, we know about Barry Marshall.
Look, I had to put a few of these in because we have talked about these before. So Barry Marshall, you know what he did? Drank a potion, probably not a potion, Helicobacter pylori, to demonstrate that it was the cause of stomach ulcers. Went on to win a Nobel Prize and get a Wholesome Show episode for his efforts.
And to this day, he still says, I don't really remember the Nobel Prize, but when I heard you guys covered me,
I know, finally.
That's when he actually stopped doing any research.
He fits clearly into the hero category. He did something and got deserved accolades for it.
Yeah, 8 million kroner. And one of those really fancy tuxes where the tie's white and you wear tails.
Oh, my God. Rosalind Yallo.
Yallo.
She's the only woman that I've got in the list here.
Are you saying men are more renowned for being idiotic self-experimenters than women?
Vastly so.
Huh,
I'll tell you the numbers later.
Shocked.
An American medical physicist. She collaborated with Solomon Burson to develop radioimmunoassay. So radioisotopes injected into your blood to measure tiny quantities of biological substance as they flow around the body.
So nuclear medicine.
Yeah, we'll start off using some of those techniques. Like a nuclear imaging type thing.
Yeah.
And she tested it on herself and won the Nobel Prize for her efforts in this space. So she's a hero.
She's a hero, but that's not very interesting. I mean, well done on the Nobel Prize, but like, come on, couldn't you do something dumb as well? Couldn't you dress weird?
Look,
I mean, I don't want to detract from a Nobel. I mean, I'm still waiting for mine. Nobel Prize in podcasting.
Yeah, it's coming.
Science category / Nathaniel Kleitman.
Nathaniel Kleitman is a physiologist and sleep researcher, and he's considered the father of modern sleep research.
Okay.
He opened the world's first sleep lab in 1925. He published like the major textbook on sleep in 1939.
Mm-hmm. I started reading it, but I dozed off. You're welcome.
There, that's beautiful. He discovered REM sleep. But early on, he's doing a lot of the work on himself. So one of his earliest
that doesn't sound terrible. I'm a sleep researcher. What are you doing? Experimenting.
Excuse me. He trekked above the Arctic Circle, a 2-week stay underwater in a submarine during World War II to see how it affects his sleep.
Did the the claustrophobia have anything to do with it?
I don't know.
I think if you're screaming 24/7, it's harder to sleep.
He and his research assistant spent 28 days in an underground cave in Kentucky where there's no natural light.
Cool.
To see how that would affect their circadian rhythms. They lived for, this is 32 days at however it was 140 feet below ground.
Yeah.
Sleeping for 9 hours, working for 10 and resting for another 9 hours. So Kleitman, who was 43 at the time, was unable to adjust his 24-hour internal clock over the course of the month, whereas his assistant, who was only 20, adjusted to the new 28-hour day within the first week underground. So
interesting.
It's the first sorts of studies that lead into the idea of circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
He spent years using himself as a guinea pig in his experiments. Now there's not worms or anything like that. He's just having a nap for science. He kept himself awake for.
I'd be prepared to do that.
One time he kept himself awake for 180 hours straight to study the effects of sleep deprivation. He lived to be 104. So 180 hours, I'm dead.
I'm bad at 17 hours. Are we ready? August Beer. I like that sound.
Yeah, these guys are idiots. I don't know. Beginning of the 20th century, August Carl Gustav Beer was a German surgeon.
Was he German? Really?
Yeah. Working on methods for spinal anesthesia.
Oh, this is going to go well.
His idea was injecting cocaine into cerebrospinal fluid.
That's what I told the judge, and they did not buy it.
He volunteered himself, of course.
Of course he did, yep.
So his assistant had him down on the table, got the spinal needle into the spine. Cerebrospinal fluid was flowing out freely from it.
Cool.
But he discovered the needle they had with the cocaine was the wrong size.
Cool.
Couldn't get it in.
So he just blew it in with a straw.
During the efforts to fit the syringe into the hub of the needle, a great deal of cerebrospinal fluid oozed out.
Feck me.
Most of the cocaine to be injected was lost, and the spinal anesthetic was considered a complete failure. However,
that sounds great.
Beer decided not to miss the occasion.
No.
So later that same evening, they switched around, and Beer performed a cocaine spinal anesthetic on his assistant, Hildebrand. After the injection, Hildebrand was temporarily unable to move or feel any sensation in his legs.
That's so relaxing.
Well, that's what they were looking for.
Sure.
The profound anesthesia of his legs was demonstrated using increasingly painful stimuli, including a needle inserted down to the femur, a blow with an iron hammer to the shins, ripping out his pubic hair.
He just did that. That wasn't on the protocol. He's like, this would be funny.
Strong pressure and traction to his testicles. Later that evening, they celebrated with wine and cigars.
Pulling out his pubes. Come on.
They both experienced severe post-spinal headaches.
Did they?
Lasting for days and days.
Beer himself lost, 8 litres of spinal fluid?
And apparently they never worked together after that.
Wonder why. The things that happened, we don't talk about it anymore. Cocaine into the cerebrospinal fluid.
I think it worked. It's probably a pretty good one.
Yeah. James Young Simpson.
Oh, thank you very much to listener Darren Saunders for this one. Listener and friend of the pod. Sir James Young Simpson.
Whether he wants to be or not, you are our friend.
Sir James Young Simpson, Scottish obstetrician and significant figure in the history of medicine. Like he did a lot of things. But what he and his friends used to do is like, we're looking for anesthetics. And so he and his friends, every time they could get one, they would go over to Simpson's house, sit around in the evening and trying new chemicals to see if they had any anesthetic effect.
See, people don't do that anymore. That's the problem with video games. They don't use their imaginations.
I know. Sitting around seeing if you can anesthetize yourself.
What are you going to do? Like, there's no Nintendo. Oh, let's get loaded. Do a little bit of surgery, see what happens.
I think people do still get loaded. But I
don't think you can play video games on anesthesias. Not well.
He's getting loaded for science.
Yeah.
So they finally found some chloroform, as we mentioned before from one of the others.
Yeah.
And on the 4th of November, 1847, Simpson and his friend decided to try the chloroform themselves, which they had obtained from a local pharmacist. On inhaling the chemical, they found a general mood of cheer and humour had set in. Ooh. But suddenly, all of them collapsed, only to regain consciousness the next morning. He knew as soon as he woke up that he had found something that could be used as an anaesthetic.
That and the flower in his butt. He's like, oh, who knew? There's a rose here. I don't know where that came from. This jar's getting bigger. Werner Forssmann.
He says some strange things about the ethics of this.
Does he? He says it, or his story suggests things?
German physician and researcher.
German again.
1929, he hypothesized that a catheter,
one of my favourites,
which had been at the time being used, a urinary catheter, could be inserted directly into the heart.
Oh yeah, okay.
For such applications as directly delivering drugs, injecting dyes if you need, like the radio dyes, or measuring blood pressure. But at the time, everyone was like, "No way, no way! You put anything in the heart, you are dead.
It explodes, and that's the end of it."
But he said, "Well, all right, I'm going to try this myself." His department chief said, "No, don't." But anyway.
And let me put that in writing. No, don't.
Forssmann persuaded the operating nurse to assist him.
Mm-hmm.
She agreed with and said, only if you do it to me, but not to yourself. And Forssmann was like, yeah, cool. I will do it to you.
Wow.
I know.
She's a keeper.
She's a strong volunteer.
No, sir, you are too important.
Forssmann tricked her by restraining her to the operating table and pretending to locally anesthetize and cut her arm while actually he's doing it on himself. So she's
sounds complex.
She's chained up to the table and he's pretending to inject her, but he's actually doing it himself. Then once he's got it in, he lets her go and says, "Okay, you're going to need to help me now."
Right.
Because he's already got the urinary catheter into his into the vein in his arm, and he's like, "All right, can you push it all the way through into my heart?" So up it goes, slide it through, and she's like, "All right, I guess I'll help now that you've made me do this. Thanks, buddy." Slid it all the way through, and then he says, "And can you now call the X-ray department?" So they walked down to the X-ray department with the catheter.
You leave it in as long as you can. I mean, you would.
And the X-ray department guy is like, "What what are you doing here, buddy,
mate?"
But he took an X-ray and showed that the catheter was 60 centimeters up his arm and all the way into his heart. And Forssmann was fired twice for these.
You're not just fired, you're double fired.
Yeah, he was.
Get out of here.
He was fired, and then they kind of gave him his job back, and then they're like, "No, you're fired. You're fired."
You know how he said, "Don't do that again," and you did that again?
Now, look, he was doing this in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Stuff in Germany, this was 1929. Stuff in Germany got really weird. Forssmann, he was fired for a while. He became a Nazi. And then I don't think he was involved in the worst. He was like an army doctor during, so helping out troops and stuff like that. Then he was a lumberjack for a while after the war. He couldn't really get a medical job. I think while he was a lumberjack in 1956, they rang him up and said, "Dude, you got the Nobel Prize."
What?
I know. So he got the Nobel Prize for it, and he's probably not a perfect person.
No,
but a bit of a hero there. So
that's a tricky one. He's a double-edged sword. Isaac Newton. Who's she?
Isaac Newton. Oh, we've talked about Isaac Newton before. And he's not famous in the world of self-experimentation.
No, he dropped that apple on his head.
No, but this is one of his experiments when he's trying to work out how color works. And
this sounds good.
Well, there was a debate. I don't know if this was a debate in Isaac Newton's head or with the rest of the world, where the color was something that was out there in the world. You know, your tree is green and brown, your apple is red, or if it's a product of your eye.
Yeah.
So what he did.
Oh, that's that whole, do you see red the same way I see red?
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the curvature of my eyeball and see what happens.
Well.
So he got a bodkin, which is like a thick wooden sewing needle, and put it down beside his eyeball.
Wow,
I think this is when he's a teenager as well. And then he squeezed, I took a bodkin betwixt my eye and bone as near to the backside of my eye as I could. And so he's sort of squeezing and deforming his eyeball.
You know how I can't do eye drops? This I think I'd even find harder. Although to be fair, it doesn't matter if you blink, I suppose.
He's not normally famed as physically heroic, but the idea of squeezing your eyeball from the inside.
Also, a freaking bodkin, like, don't you do sails and shit with that? Like, you sew up
Probably.
canvas with basically, I don't know, whale tendons or something and bits of rope. It's not a delicate device.
He saw some spots, and
That's called panic.
when you poke yourself in the eye, you disrupt your vision. He didn't blind himself, and the experiment and subsequent related ones led him to some big discoveries in optics. So,
Yeah, he did do a lot of optics. I didn't realize he did it like that. Justin O. Schmidt. Old one.
you may note my code again. I just had to include him because we did talk about him on this podcast a while ago. And in fairness, all of these stories are like the sort of stories that is our crack, really. But a while ago, Rod told me the story of Justin O. Schmidt, who invented the Schmidt pain index, which describes the stinging pain of different ants, bees, wasps, and sawflies. Basically by getting them to sting him, and then he would describe it. The worst was the tarantula hawk. Tarantula hawk wasp?
Wasp, yeah.
The sting of the artistic wasp, which was a number 2 on this 4-point scale, was described as pure, then messy, then corrosive. Love and marriage followed by divorce.
That's pretty ballsy doing that. I'm going to sting myself and stab myself and then describe them carefully. Edwin Katsky.
Oh, he is well down on the idiot front.
Excellent. Finally an idiot. Finally a hero emerges.
1936. Like many others, Edwin Katsky is thinking about anesthetics.
Yeah.
He's a proctologist working in Nebraska.
Well, you do need a good anesthesia for that.
Cocaine was the idea here. On the night of November 25th,
When you get you fried and check out your date?
something like that. I don't know why as a proctologist he's like, I need to.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like having a peak probably doesn't need an anesthetic. Maybe it's psychological. It's not my fault. I was high on the cocaines.
I think if he is doing some surgery too.
Oh, you want that.
The proctal area.
There are a lot of nerves down there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Night of November 25th, 1936. He took what I've seen described, and we can't find any of the actual numbers on this, as a large injection of cocaine.
Ooh.
And then recorded the clinical course of his symptoms in notes that he wrote on the wall of his office.
Which was coincidentally padded and had no window.
Well, yeah. Katsky scrawled the notes in no apparent order.
Oh, cool.
But it's possible, based on how crazy the handwriting gets, to kind of work out an order. So an early note that is written in decent handwriting is like, eyes mildly dilated, vision excellent. Then there's other things, and you can see like bouts of paralysis and convulsions. So
that would show up, yeah.
Partial recovery, smokes a cigarette. High up on the wall, he scribbled, now able to stand up. And elsewhere, after depression is terrible. Advise all inquisitive MDs to lay off this stuff. Probably the last thing that he said was in a shaky hand towards the end. Clinical course over about 12 minutes. This ended with the words paralysis, which tapered off in a wavy scrawl. You can see some of this writing here.
That's what most of my first year anthropology notes look like.
Descending to the floor.
Yeah.
So the word paralysis. And that's the last word that he ever wrote.
Oh.
He died.
Oh, no, he just didn't stop writing. He just cocaine strong.
Yeah, that was a death due to self-experimentation.
I had that. So my first year anthropology lectures used to happen in a big building called the Tank. No windows, very little air, and you basically bring your lunch. You'd watch an anthropological movie for the first hour, and then there'd be the lecture.
Oh, okay.
And so all my notes are just full of like written sentence, bleh, and then it spins out as I'm dozing off, and then sentence, bleh.
Okay, dozing off, it's a bit different.
Very difficult. No cocaine, just sleeping. Nicholas Senegan,
Here we
part
go.
2.
Oh, look, I had to. This guy is my favorite. So part 1, he inserted that piece of cancer under his skin to see if it was contagious.
Yeah.
Part 2 it's a very different task.
He ate a whole cancer patient.
Around 1886, Sen pumped nearly 6 litres of hydrogen through his anus. He used a rubber balloon holding 4 gallons of hydrogen gas, connected to a rubber tube, and inserted that into his anus. The assistant sealed the tube by squeezing the anus against it. So
Push really hard.
I think put the tube in and then squeeze, probably the bum
pull the
cheeks,
cheeks.
pull the cheeks together.
I kind of tape them up.
The hydrogen was inserted. I remember this guy went on to become AMA president. Was inserted by squeezing the balloon while monitoring the pressure on a manometer.
Jesus Christ.
He had previously done this experiment on dogs to the point of rupturing the intestine, so he didn't want to go that far. So that's why he's got a pressure monitor.
Coward.
So why did he want to do this?
I don't know. Curiosity.
Well, they wanted to see.
This is what you call blue sky research, right? I just want to know. There could be spin-offs. Look, Wi-Fi.
Who knows? Who knows? He wanted to know if bullets in gunshot wounds, if you can tell if they've perforated the intestine. And so what happens is...
So the next step is blow gas up your butt.
Well, he did it with dogs. He could show that gas escaping from the wound could be lit on fire. If so...
And if the fire's lit anywhere other than from the anus...
Well, if you've got a bullet hole, so he didn't do the whole bullet hole thing, but he did to a dog, I think. You shoot the dog.
Yep, obviously.
Then,
most experiments start that way.
And then insert the hydrogen gas and pump the dog full of it. And then if you can light it on fire, it's like, look, the bullet went through the intestine.
Yeah, I'm going to call that an experiment that didn't need to happen. I feel like pretty easy to verify without.
My God.
He just wanted to put gas up his bum. I'm convinced.
With his assistant there to help.
Well, that was part of the deal.
I don't understand why he needed to do that, but
just these people, like the nurse with the heart catheter and this assistant here. Like, I don't really like my job anymore.
I suspect though that he's a military surgeon, so battlefield surgery. So
sure.
There may come a time when a bullet has gone in, and they're like, okay, did it go through the intestines or has it just gone through the
somebody light a match?
Yeah, let's put some hydrogen in and light a match and see.
So you've been shot potentially in the guts, and someone goes, look, just to be sure, we're going to blow a bunch of gas up your bum before we do anything else. Like,
yes,
I want a different field hospital. I want Hawkeye. I don't want this. Like, that's dreadful. I'm sure there is a reason, and he's your hero, and I don't mean to diss on your hero.
I don't think he's my hero. I just think this is it.
You look pretty glistening-eyed there when I got him again. Jacques-Joseph Moreau, the island of Dr. Moreau.
French psychiatrist. I just want to raise this because he's a member of in the mid-19th century, the Club des Hachishins.
The Hachishins, yeah.
Hachishins. Yeah. So it's a club where
go for long runs.
No, some elite French society would go around and experiment with hash. And he was the first physician to do systematic work on the drug's effects on the central nervous system. And he published his work, and he said it's critical for us to do this self-experimentation with a whole bunch of people around watching and seeing how we get on. So
that was my mistake. So look, I did a lot of the systematic stuff in uni, but I forgot to write it up. That was my mistake. Systematic
by being repetitive.
Yes, very repetitive and under controlled conditions.
Under controlled conditions, on the same couch. Yeah, I get it.
It's not sometimes a friend's couch. But we forgot to write it up.
That's it.
That Nobel could have been mine.
He wrote it up.
Bastard jerk. And then we'd be talking about me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so disappointed. William Stark from Stark Industries.
I'm surprised that I didn't talk about this guy before.
You did?
No. I'm surprised I didn't talk about him a few weeks ago because he was an early experimenter on scurvy. London, June 1769. Stark wanted to find the cause of scurvy, exploring a series of dietary experiments on himself. He devised a series...
Yellow fever vomit? no scurvy. Gas up the bum, no scurvy.
24 dietary experiments and kept accurate measures of temperature and weather conditions, the weights of all the foods he consumed, and the weight of all daily excretions.
See, again, this is another person, like he's got a habit and he's looking for an excuse to make it seem
I want to weigh my poo.
okay. Yeah, I like to bag it up.
He started with a diet of basic bread and water and became dull and listless. He continued the experiment by gradually adding various foods one at a time: olive oil, milk, roast goose, and others.
So I was wondering how far up the list roast goose would be. It just makes sense.
They had weird diets back then, man.
I need
When does the roast goose come back in? Surely number 4.
panther, cinnamon. I mean, I'm just not sure.
And after 2 months, he had symptoms of scurvy.
Yeah. Because the goose didn't fix that.
But he didn't know what to add back in to fix the scurvy.
Not enough goose.
By November 1769, he was living on nothing but honey puddings and Cheshire cheese.
Doesn't sound terrible.
It doesn't. He considered testing fresh fruits and vegetables when he died in February 1770.
I was just going to try and oh, that's gold. I nearly got to the thing that mattered. Scurvy, huh? What a rascal. Joseph Barcroft.
Okay, this guy did a whole bunch. He was considered prolific in self-experimentation.
So mega idiot.
Mega
hero.
I don't know if he. Well, actually, okay. He was a British physiologist, and he worked in particular.
They've got a good reputation.
In the First and Second World Wars as the chief physiologist at the Gas Warfare Centre in the UK.
Cool.
So you can see what's coming here. In the course of his research, he regularly used himself as a test subject, calling these his borderland excursions, which I love that name.
Just go into the borderlands. Shall be back.
During World War I, he was carrying out experiments on asphyxiating gas.
Yeah.
You can understand?
Yeah.
So he shut himself in a chamber with a dog and pumped it full of hydrogen cyanide.
Cool.
After a few seconds, the dog went into convulsions and appeared to die, but Barcroft continued for another 2 minutes until they dragged him out. The next morning, the dog was found to be alive and apparently fully recovered.
Huh.
It's not known why dogs are more susceptible. In 1920, he spent 6 or 7 days in a sealed glass chamber to investigate respiration at altitude and the minimum quantity of oxygen required for human survival. So he got to the equivalent altitude of like 18,000 feet and came out suffering severe hypoxia.
Yeah.
1931.
6 or 7 days.
Yeah, 6 or 7 days. I don't know how big the jar was, but it's really starving himself of oxygen.
If they're describing it as a jar, I'm guessing it's not roomy.
Okay, maybe jar was me. He wanted to find out freezing temperatures. So he stripped naked and lay down on a table in a refrigerated chamber in the Woods Hole Research Centre.
Yeah.
At first, he shivered and curled up to stay warm. He found it difficult to maintain the willpower to remain in the room. He kept thinking, I could just walk out of here right now.
Yeah.
But he persevered, and after about an hour, a strange mental change occurred. All sense of modesty disappeared. Suddenly, he didn't care if someone unrelated to the experiment might walk in and find him naked. But even more strangely, as he described to an audience a few years later, the sense of coldness passed away.
Yeah.
And it was succeeded by a beautiful feeling of warmth. The word bask most fitly describes my condition. I was basking in the cold.
Just before I died.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Towards the end of the experiment, he showed signs of final stages of hypothermia.
Yep.
He was thought to be close to death, and then he was rescued by a colleague. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize but didn't win.
Because he was rescued by a colleague. Coward.
Possibly. No, you can't win the Nobel Prize posthumously.
Yeah, and also if you pike out. Daniel Alcides Carrion.
Peruvian medical student.
Ah.
In 1885, he infected himself from the pus in the purple wart of a female patient.
Mm-hmm. That's the worst euphemism I've ever heard.
I don't know. If you see someone that's got a purple wart and you think, I wonder what that would be like in me. Like,
you don't do that.
No, I don't.
I don't think I've ever seen a purple wart.
He developed an acute form of Bartonellosis, now known as Carrion's disease, after him. It's a rare disease found only in Peru and certain other parts of South America. He kept detailed notes of his condition and succeeded in showing through his self-experiment that the chronic and acute forms were the same disease.
Okay.
He died from the disease after several weeks. A student who had assisted Carrion in carrying out his work was charged with murder but later released.
Died from a disease. Oh, but it's cool because we named it after you. So that's sweet. Claude Barlow.
American physician. In 1944, He wanted to know whether American snails could become infected.
He wanted to know if Americans were snails.
American snails could become infected with an Egyptian worm that then got into humans. So it's schistosomatosis.
Oh, yeah.
Schistosome worms. So they get from worm into snail into human. Causes a pretty bad disease. And he wanted to know, would that happen in America?
No.
The problem was they couldn't get any of these snails to America. They tried sending them by the mail, but they kept dying. So he decided to go to Egypt and ingest 200 of the schistosome worms to carry them back to the United States.
I was going to say, because I think eating snails doesn't preserve them that well.
No, well,
The snail.
It's kind of weird. He got back to America, but refused treatment for the schistosomatiasis. But despite becoming desperately ill because he wanted to keep the eggs.
Yeah.
He finally passed 200 eggs in his urine and 4,000 eggs in his semen.
I know you don't feel very well right now, but Nurse Smithers here.
The US government decided not to use the eggs, so his self-sacrifice was to no avail.
Like any of them? It's like, gross.
Yeah, none.
Ew.
So they didn't even test on that.
That's lame. I mean, he did a lot. Ella Mechnikov. Eli. I should actually read the letters.
He's a Russian zoologist.
Is he?
Best known for his work on immunology. He went on to win the Nobel Prize, but long before that, in 1885, he was suffering from depression. And he said, well, look, I want to end it all, but I want to end it all with science in mind.
That's how I want to go.
He injected himself with relapsing fever. I don't know quite what it is, but
it happens regularly. Yeah, okay.
He chose this method of death so that it would be of benefit to medicine, but he survived. And then later he self-experimented with cholera.
He's really determined.
Yeah, he's really determined. And then he went on to win the Nobel Prize for his immunology work. So
wow, that didn't kill me. Give me another one. And our last candidate, Nikolai Minovici.
I don't understand why he was doing this.
That's a good start.
But in the early 1900s, Nikolai Minovici, a professor of forensic science in Bucharest, undertook a series of experiments into hanging.
Oh.
At first, he put the noose.
This is all sexual.
I might
straight away. So
there's pictures of him here.
Auto asphyxiation.
He put the noose around his neck while lying down and had an assistant put tension on the rope.
I don't want to do this job anymore. I quit.
And then he moved on to full suspension by the neck. Finally, he attempted suspension with a slipping hangman's knot, but the pain was too great for him to continue. He couldn't swallow for a month.
Oh, what?
He was determined to surpass a record set by Dr. Fleischmann of Erlangen, who in 1832 had self-asphyxiated for 2 minutes.
So that's the worst record to exist. Better yet, try and hold. No. Couldn't swallow for a month. I mean, I take that as an exaggeration because he had to eat and drink, but like it sucked for a month at least.
Oh my God. So look, you might get a picture from that. You know, heroes, idiots, and sad stories.
Fine line.
So Alan Weiss, he went through and looked at all the literature and he found 514 cases of self-experimentation that had made it to publication, at least 7 of which went on to win Nobel Prizes. Five of them also won Nobel Prizes, but not for their self-experimentation work. So,
in spite of,
yeah, well, not necessarily, but like Barry Marshall clearly got it for his self-experimentation. Yep. So did Forstmann in 1956. Interestingly, there was a huge gap there. Like Marshall got it in 2005. Forstmann was the most recent previously in 1956.
Oh, it's a freaking bias.
Well, people are doing it a lot less. The peak was in the sort of mid 20th century.
Look, a lot of that's got to be straight up ethics committees, right?
It's kind of ethics committees. It's kind of also bigger science, I think. Like there's just more and more teams. Like to do anything, you need a team of 20 or 30 people.
And turning to your assistant these days, HR-wise, and say, I need you to strangle me.
Could you
put my nuts in a fry pan and put a brick on top? Like a lot of people would say, I don't want this job anymore.
Weiss found 8 deaths. Women in distinct minority. He found 12 out of the 465 over the last 200 years.
Wow.
5 of whom were Russian. I don't know why he was noticed.
Why were they in such a hurry? That is a tiny percentage. Okay, so that's almost just noise in the data. Like that was almost coincidence. That's such a tiny number.
It does say that it's not exclusively men being idiots, but...
No, just 98%.
Yeah, there's something.
Wow.
countries doing it the most. United States had the most,
Yeah.
33% of the total, followed by Germany, United Kingdom, Russia, and France. In a remarkable 89% of instances, the self-experiments obtained positive results in support of a hypothesis or valuable data that had been sought. So the question I've got then, you sit on an ethics committee.
Yeah. I'd say yes to all of it. I think we'd be unallowed to.
Unallowed to approve it?
Yeah. I think, no, actually that's not fair. I think it would be very difficult to make an argument for such intrusive things like this. I mean, if they were,
worms,
self-infection, that sort of thing, I think would be very difficult. And arguments, I can imagine arguments running into, you have a self-interest and a bias in doing it as opposed to anything else.
That's one of the big ones, I think. Yeah. So like the Nuremberg Code, like after the Second World War, it's sort of foundational in a lot of medical ethics. And and one of the key lines is, don't do anything that you wouldn't do to yourself. And so that probably holds for a lot of medical researchers. Yeah. But
then you get to the point where that doesn't mean you should do it because you are prepared to do it to yourself.
Yeah.
It's not as if all medical researchers are representative of the standard person.
I think in some directions there's scientists that say, we know more about the risks here than anyone else.
Sure.
So, we have better informed consent than anyone else.
But no, we have situations, so even social research, I've sat on panels where people have asked if they've applied to be able to, basically, I exaggerate for the fun of it, parachute behind enemy lines in an active conflict zone, but they say it's cool because I speak the language and, I've got a contact. And you're like, and that isn't in many ways exactly the same. Like I want to dive in there and interview these people who have been victims of crime, whatever it may be. And you're like, but you're in a lot of danger doing that.
Yeah.
Call me crazy, but or a lot of unknowns. And this is in some ways the same.
I think the thing here is it's not banned in a lot of places. A lot of people think it is banned.
Explicitly no.
But I think that the interesting questions are you don't need to ask for ethical permission to do stuff to yourself necessarily. But can you use that data in your thesis or in your publication?
I think you could argue, though, you do need to talk about participants in research. If the research involves a human participant, whether it's you or not, if it's you, it does involve a human participant. Yeah. So I reckon that technicality wouldn't fly.
So this is the interesting one. There's a lot of idiots in this story. But someone like Barry
God
Marshall,
bless him, one and
Barry
all.
Marshall was pretty recent. Like he was doing his stuff in the 90s. Would a medical ethics board approve that?
I suspect not doing it that way, but he did loose cannon shit, and he had reasons. He had his frustrations. If you really want to hear it all, listen to that episode. But he was frustrated by a staid medical professional attitude.
Yeah.
So I think in the end, you do it, you get a result that works. It'll be fine.
I think committees have to say no to this. Like if any of these stories, if someone was saying, should I do this? I'd be like, no, that is too much of a risk to you.
Well, in the defense of ethics committees, which I never thought as a PhD student, I'd say, but they will look for ways to try and facilitate what you want to do, at least at our uni. So I don't know if it'll be an arbitrary no, unless there's actually a clause, which I should probably know, but I don't. Unless there's actually a rule that said you can't do it to yourself. But I think there'd be other ways to argue it's not a great idea. I personally am not necessarily against it because there have been good results. Barry Marshall, for one.
There's a lot of important results in here.
Yeah, there are reasons to do it.
And medical ethics boards do slow us down. But
they do.
But it's not, when I see so many of, the fact that it's so many guys tends to suggest there's a social pattern going on here.
Yeah.
Like that maybe there's peer pressure or there's self-aggrandizement. You're like, I can do this when maybe we should slow down.
If we're also looking over history, more dudes in science until recently anyway, so that's not a surprise. There's straight proportions here.
Sure.
But it seems like a very guy thing. I'm going to go and get a balloon and some vomit right now.